Good morning, guys. I am soft skills trainer from Department of Career Planning and Development, and today we are going to study type of interviews. So interviews plays very important role when you're trying to start your professional life. It is the beginning of your professional life, and even if you are a professional, you have to face interviews many times in life. So what basically an interview is? An interview is basically an answer to know and ascertain how fit a man is to the required job. Whenever you go for an interview, the interviewer asks you many type of questions, and interview is beneficial for both the candidate and the organization, and it helps them to grow. And there are various type of interviews that we are going to talk about today. But basically, what an interview is. An interview can be split into two words, inter and view. This roughly translates to between view and seeing each other. This means that both the groups involved in the interview get to know each other, and that way the interviews are being conducted. So what is the definition of an interview? An interview's definition can be crafted as a gentle conversation between two people or more, where questions are asked from a person to get the required response. In an interview, there are two people involved. Basically, there can be more people as well. There can be more interviewers and one interviewee. There can be number of interviewees and one interviewer, right? So basically, interviewer is the person who asks the questions from the interviewee, and interviewee is a person who is required to answer the questions that are being asked. Basically, these are the people who are involved in the interviews. Many people face a lot of problems while they go for interviews. So let's talk about the prerequisites or do's and don'ts of an interview. So guys, basically, while we go for an interview, there are certain things that we need to take care of. The very first thing is your formal attire. So if you are going for an interview, you need to be dressed formally. You need to have a formal attire because you are going to be a professional very soon, and if you do not go in formal attire, you will not be selected basically, right? So the very first thing, your attire plays a very important role as far as interviews are concerned. The second thing, when you enter the premises or you enter the interview room, it is very important to knock at the door. Most of the times there would be people who would be just accompanying you to the interview, or maybe they'll show you the room and everything. But when you go there, always knock at the door, because this is basic manners, right? So knock at the door and ask for the permission to come in. When the interviewer tells you to come in, you can go inside. And one more basic thing that you ought to do there is to greet the interviewer. It is very important to greet the interviewer, right? So whichever time of the day it is, greet them accordingly, right? Then when you enter, most of the times, like 90% of the times, they tell you to sit on their own. But if they fail to do so, or they are indulged in compiling the data, they are indulged in doing any other activity, you'll always have to ask them if you can sit or not, right? So when you ask them, you can sit, and then the interview begins. Most of the times, the very first question that would be asked from you would be to introduce yourself, right? So be thorough with your introduction. Your introduction is the mirror of your personality. Whatever you are going to do there, it is going to be the first impression that you're going to create on the interviewer. So whenever you go, be prepared with your introduction at least. The second thing and the main thing that we need to take care of is, whenever we are answering the questions that are being asked from us, it is very important to maintain the regular eye contact. If you fail to maintain the eye contact, obviously the other person either will think that you are not interested in the interview, or they might think that you are not confident enough. In both the cases, it is not very beneficial for you, right? So most of the people consider interviews as a burden, or sometimes they think that it is the interviewer is always going to sort of bully you, or they're going to always not support you. But that is not the case at all, students. The interviewer most of the times are very supportive, and whatever questions they ask you, you need to make a normal conversation with them. It is basically an interaction that you made in a professional manner, and that you make with a professional. So be happy to interact with them. Obviously nobody likes a person who will not be happy to talk to you. So be interactive, maintain eye contact, and be happy about the interview, right? Okay. The other thing that most of the people do wrong is, when you are already in the interview, that means you've already passed various other stages of the process of recruitment, or process of hiring or placement. That means here they are interested to know about your personality. Let it be any kind of interview, they're interested in knowing who you actually are and what type of a person you are, what are your qualities and everything. So guys, feel free to speak up in a formal manner. Whatever they ask you, answer every question very formally. Avoid giving one word and one line answers. Why? Because if you are in an interview where your communication skills are being judged, and you give one line or one word answers, how is the examiner going to check your communication skills? So it is mandatory, or it is very important to answer elaborately, right? Elaborate your answers. For example, sometimes questions like this are being asked: which animal do you relate yourself to? So sometimes, even most of the times, even very good students, they end up answering the animal that I can relate, or they don't even explain it. They just say, for example, some of the students, they say leopard or a lion, and they do not elaborate on it. So basically, when they're asking you which animal you can relate yourself to, and you're answering it in one word, obviously it is not going to create a very good impression, because the next question would be why. So why not to answer it at the beginning? So if you're preferring, okay, there are some people who relate themselves to horse, right? So you have to explain why are you relating yourself to horse. Fine. So be elaborative with your answers. The other thing, no matter what the interviewer is saying, no matter if the interviewer is laughing, you do not have to do the same. You basically have to answer their questions very seriously. And by seriously, I do not mean that you don't have to smile. You can obviously smile, but you don't have to laugh, right? One more thing, maintaining eye contact, even if interviewer is not looking at you, is also necessary. Sometimes they will show you that they're not interested in the conversation that you're making, or maybe they'll be looking here and there. So you do not have to think that they're not interested in the conversation, and you will not lose your confidence because of that. Always look at the examiner, maintain eye contact, be interested in them. Fine. So these were some of the do's and don'ts of the interview, right? So let's move forward and see what are the type of interviews and how are we gonna ace them. But before going on to that, let's see what are the objectives of an interview basically. So what can be the objectives of an interview? You go there, you're being interviewed, you're being asked questions. So why are they taking this much of pain, and why are they conducting interviews actually? The very first thing that the objective of the interview is, it helps to verify the information provided by the candidate. So whatever information you have provided them, it helps them to verify. Because if I have provided in my resume that I am a very good communicator, or maybe my communication skills are really good, but while it is one of my strengths basically, but while I go for the actual interview and I sit there, I am not able to utter a single word. That means the information that I have provided in my resume is not correct. So basically, very first thing is they are going to verify what you've written. So whatever you mention in your resume should be true, and you should be able to authenticate each and everything that you've written. Fine. The second thing, it does not give interviewer the the information about your technical knowledge, but it also gives them an insight into your analytical skills. There are various type of interviews, and in some type of interviews, questions based on your past, your behavior, your how you handled stress, how you handle a lot of situations in life would be asked. So while you will be answering them, they will analyze you as a whole. They'll analyze you as a human being. You are being judged basically when you enter the room. Once you enter the room, your body language, how you're sitting, how you're talking to them, what are your expressions, everything would be judged. So they will analyze you as as a whole. The other thing, it also helps establishing mutual relation between the employee and the company. So while you are interacting with them, you get to know what they want from you, and you get to and they get to know what you want from them. So there you discuss your salary, you discuss about the company, you get to know other things about the company. Yes, one more thing that a lot of people forget to do while they go for such interviews or any interview, always research about the company, whichever company you're going to take an interview for. Just research about that company, because sometimes they ask you, what do you know about the company? So rather than fumbling there, and rather than saying, okay, I just know the name of the company and nothing that is interesting or that is different. So keep on researching about each and every company you are going to give interview for. It is very important. It creates a good impression. So while they'll be asking you, what do you know about my company, and you'll have a lot of stuff to talk about, obviously you are going to be feeling, they're going to feel happy about it, and they'll know that you're actually interested in the company. So it is going to create a very good impression on them. Okay, also interviews are helpful for people as well. While you will be going there and you will be talking there, you will be able to know where do you actually lack. Sometimes we think that we are very confident and we won't face any problem while people will be interviewing us, but while we go for actual interviews, we face problems in answering certain type of questions. So while you go for an interview, you have you can assess yourself as well, which is very important, I guess. Okay, so these were the basic objects of interview. Now we are going to talk about types of interview. So there are various types of interviews. Basically, the very first is one-to-one interview or personal interview. So while we talk about one-to-one interviews, it is the most common among the type of interviews. It involves the interviewer asking questions, maybe both technical and general, to the interviewee to investigate how fit the candidate is for the job. So these type of interviews are being conducted where in small organization, mid-level and high-level jobs, in big organizations. Basically, the HR interviews that are conducted in placement drives and in any sort of recruitment are one-to-one interviews. And one-to-one interviews, people are mostly afraid about one-to-one interviews. The only thing that you need to carry to your the major thing that you need to carry to your one-to-one interview is your confidence. If you are confident, you are basically able to ace the interview, and you will definitely be selected. So there are various type of questions that are asked in your one-to-one interviews. Talking about your resume based questions, they can ask you questions related to your resume. So resume based questions can basically be they can ask you, what is your career objective? You've already mentioned your career objective in your resume, but still they would be asking you. So your career objective that you've already mentioned in the resume, it should be same. You cannot change your career objective because they sometimes test you with that. Whatever you've mentioned in the resume, you have actually read that afterwards or not. So always be thorough with your resume. Whatever you write in that, you should be knowing about it. Sometimes people end up writing in their resume that they are avid readers. So if somebody is an avid reader would basically be interested in reading, would have keen interest in reading, and while the examiner or the interviewer asks a person whether they which book they read last, so sometimes they are not answerable in such situations, and they're not able to speak or even utter a name of a single book. So if you're mentioning in your resume that you're an avid reader and you read a lot of books, at least learn, or at least read 2 or 3 books, I would suggest, right? Reading 2 or 3 books is not going to take a lot of time, and you'll have something to speak about there. So be thorough with everything. Next is your projects. Whatever projects you've done, your project description is already given in the resume, but sometimes what people do is they copy their description from the other person, and they're not knowing about it. You mentioned that you have been a leader in that particular project, but then you don't know about the project. Guys, it also gives a very bad impression. So whatever you've written in your resume, they can ask you questions related to that in your one-to-one interview. So your personal interview is basically all about you, your resume, your behavior. They can ask you whether you're willing to relocate or not. So most of the times the answers should be diplomatic, and the answers should be positive, because you're going to create a positive impression there. So it should be highly positive. The other kind of interview that we're going to talk about is group interview. The first one was one-to-one or personal interview. The other type of interview is group interview. So group interview involves multiple candidates, and they are given a topic for discussion. They are assessed on their conversational ability and how satisfactorily they are able to have their own views and makes other believe them. Fine. So basically at fresher levels and at mid-level post sales, post marketing and everything, MBA people, even if you want to take admission somewhere in a good MBA college, there also you are you will be facing group interviews. So group interviews, they will be giving you a topic, and then you'll have to discuss about it, right? So group interviews basically involves group discussions. That means discussions. So it is going to be an interview wherein you will be given time for preparation of the topic. You will be given 3 to 5 minutes for the preparation of the topic, and then you'll have to discuss that for about 12 minutes, right? It can be 8 to 12 minutes. Most of them give you 12 minutes to discuss. So in group interviews, basically it is always being suggested that you should be a leader. That means you should lead, you should initiate the conversation or the discussion basically. See guys, it depends on the topic. If you are, if you have prior knowledge about the topic, you know a lot of things about the topic, and you think whatever you're going to speak would be correct, lead. Otherwise, if you don't have knowledge about the topic, sometimes there are topics of current affairs. For example, these days coronavirus is one of the latest topics that you can get for discussion. What are the causes, what are the symptoms, how economy is being affected by it, or for that matter we can have budget 2020, because recently the budget was there. So these sort of topics can be asked, and if you are not keenly interested in studying about the general awareness, or you do not read newspapers and everything, which is obviously a very bad thing, because reading newspaper should be a mandatory part of a student's life. But if you don't read it, then obviously you can always listen to others, you can see what the others are saying, and then you can speak about it. Fine. Then when we discuss, basically this is a sort of a discussion where we come to a particular conclusion, right? We are not going to debate, so you don't have to contradict any other person. You can obviously give an opposite view. You can have opposite view, you can have your own viewpoint, you can give an opposite view, but you will not contradict anybody, right? In the end, we'll have conclusion, and there can be only one conclusion. So the group discussions basically forms a very important part these days. So guys, I think be prepared with the latest topics, the trending topics. Be prepared with the GDs can be abstract topics can be asked, like black is good. So if they give you a topic, black is good, I mean, you have to talk about, okay, why do you think black is good? What are the things that you have to think out of the box. Basically, you do not have to follow the conventional ways and answer the questions, but you have to be speak differently about it, and then you can create a greater impression. The important thing is to speak. To be able to speak is most important thing. Okay, next is, so the third type of interviews that we're going to talk about is panel interviews or committee interviews. So the interviews here are a group from among the company people who are in a senior position, and usually the panel interview is when the candidate is supposed to make a presentation, but many times it could be for the job interview as well, right? So the panel interview will have a lot of people from the company, 3-4 people from the company, it can be more as well, and then you have to go there and face them. They would be asking you questions turn wise, and you have to answer them. Basically, people sometimes get nervous in such interviews because there will be a lot of professionals who will be sitting around you, and you have to answer the questions. But guys, they will be very supportive, and whatever questions they would be asking are basically related to you only, related to your field of study only, related to your interests, your hobbies, related to your personality. They can ask you behavioral questions also. Taking an example of a student was being asked that what is he going to do if he has a customer who is not satisfied with the services of the company, and he has come over and he verbally abused the person or the manager, and you are the manager. So what are you going to do at that time? So guys, in such situations, obviously being a fresher, sometimes people answer that they will be answering them back, or they'll be giving them left, right and straight. But no, we are not going to do that. We are always going to answer the questions very tactfully and diplomatically. So the correct answer would be, okay, if the customer is not satisfied with the service of the company, obviously I am going to talk about the service that we have provided them, where the fault was, whose fault was it, and even if the person is verbally abusing me, I will still talk to the person very politely and make him calm, and then solve his problem. So this has to be your approach. You have to be very calm and composed, and you have to give very diplomatic answers while in the interviews. So in panel interviews, sometimes they confuse you, right? They ask you questions back to back, and you tend to get confused, but don't worry about it, right? Don't be nervous at all. As I said earlier, the most important thing that you have to wear to your interview is your confidence. If you are confident enough, nothing is going to happen to you, and you're going to rock the interview. Okay, so the third type of interviews was panel interview. Let's move towards the other type of interviews. So which interviews have we done so far? One-on-one interviews, group interviews, panel interviews. So the other type of interviews that we're gonna do is, these are based on planning involved. So they can be structured interview and unstructured interview. So structured interview are basically a formal interview or a guided interview. So it is a traditional form of interview where the questions are asked, and they are in standard format. This is to assess the ability of all the candidates impartially, right? So all the candidates are being asked similar questions, and they basically in fresher or entry-level jobs, these sort of questions are being asked. The second type of interview is unstructured interview. It can be informal interview or conversational interview. So basically these are the actually interviews based on the planning. Next very important type of interviews we are going to talk about are based on judging the abilities of the person. So how your abilities are being judged? The very first thing is behavioral based interviews. I talked about it earlier as well. So behavioral based interviews are, basically they ask you about your previous, maybe if you're already in the job, they'll ask you about your previous job, your past work experiences, how you dealt with a particular situation. So basically this type of interviews help the interviewer to understand the candidate's future performance based on his past experiences. So if you've written in your resume that you are very good at resolving conflicts between people, they will be asking you, give an example of the conflict that you solved, or they will ask you talk about a situation in which you would have sorry, in which you would have reacted differently. Okay, so basically you need to provide examples of any such situation that you've handled in your past, and you can ace the interview by that. The other kind of interview is problem solving interview, in which you will be given a certain task, right? So basically software recruitments and software recruiters, they give you such tasks to solve, and then you have to deal with that, right? Third type of interview in this particular is depth interview. So when you need to ascertain everything about the interviewee, right from life history, academic qualification, work experience, hobbies and interests, then depth interviews are being conducted. Here the interviewer interviewer has a clear idea about the questions he will be asking, but once the question is asked, he allows the conversation to flow and is more of a listener, right? He would like to listen to you, and he would like you to speak, and then the interview takes time and more of a friendly approach of the interviewer towards the interviewee. So depth interviews, basically they want to know about your overall personality. The other type of interview is stress interview. So very rare, but such interviews are conducted to see how a candidate will be able to react in stressful situations and to assess if he will be able to handle the crisis at his job or not. So there are certain tactics that they use while you're in the stress interview. For example, they will completely ignore the candidate, and they'll make a phone call in the middle of the interview, and you will feel very ignored, and maybe you will feel agitated, but you don't have to show it there, right? Other tactic can be, they'll be continuously interrupting you in between whatever you're trying to speak. They'll not listen to your answer carefully, and they'll just interrupt you in between. You'll be in a flow and you'll be giving very good answer in your opinion, but they'll interrupt you in between, and you'll be very agitated with that as well. So at that time you have to maintain your calm, and just know that these are the tactics to irritate you basically. The other thing, they'll be asking you a whole lot of questions all at once, so that you don't remember the questions. Be calm and composed and answer them very properly. Fine. Then they'll be asking you a question related to your answer. For example, as I said earlier, which animal you would relate to, you would say leopard, they would say why, and then the reason you give, again they'll be saying why. There'll be a lot of whys, and so they'll be irritating you in a way. So just take care of that. Now there can be interviews based on the facilities or the settings. They can be telephonic interviews. So basically if the person is not, if the HR manager or the HR personnel is not able to come to the particular place, or you are not able to go to a particular place and it is in the other city or somewhere, so that they conduct a telephonic interview basically. So entry level jobs have such interviews. Online interview or Skype interviews, these are not a very conventional method of carrying on interviews, but yeah, they are in trend these days. So video interviews or Skype interviews can also be one of the a type of interviews that you can face. So they'll be asking you personal questions, they'll be asking and this is done based on the situations, like the interviewee resides far off of the interview at the appointed time, and the appointed time gets cancelled due to valid reasons. Also, it is more convenient for the interviewer that can fix the interview at the spare time and convey the message to the candidate in a few hours before or so, right? So this helps, as the interviewer doesn't need to inform the candidate many days in advance. So this is also very helpful, and it is in trend these days. So Skype interviews can be, you can go for Skype interviews. Here also you need to take care of your dress sense, you need to take care of how you're speaking, your expressions and everything, because in a telephonic interview people would be just talking to you, but in your Skype interview people will be able to see you, where you're sitting and everything. So you have to take care of each and everything that you're doing. Okay, then they can have job fair interviews. So here the interviewer does a mini interview to know the qualification and the technical knowledge of the interviewer. The basic technical questions are asked to know if the candidate can proceed further or not. Fine. So it is basically in colleges and everything where have freshers for jobs, these type of interviews are being conducted. Then they can be based on task, apprenticeship interviews, evaluation interviews, promotion interviews, counseling interviews. So there are various other types of interviews that you can do, right? So how can, these were the type of interviews that we had to talk about. So the main type of interviews are one-to-one interviews, group discussions, we have panel interviews, we have stress interviews, we have behavioral interviews, we have structured interviews, we have unstructured interviews, and we have telephonic interviews, we have Skype or video conferencing interviews. So now all these type of interviews we have. So what are the steps to make them effective, and how can you have ace them, right? So very first thing is know the company beforehand. As I told you earlier, and that you have to research about the company, whichever company you are going to for the interview. Research about that company, because it is going to create a very good impression on the interviewer that you already know about the company. Fine. The second thing, the questions that are being asked in the interviews are more or less similar in each and every company, right? There are either they change the words of the question, they paraphrase the questions. Most of the times the questions asked are same, right? So what you can do is basically you can jot down the questions, right? You can practice them. Basically introduction. Many a times when we take interviews, we find that people are not able to introduce themselves even. That is obviously a very bad thing, right guys? So you have to introduce yourself basically very properly, and be able to answer the questions about yourself. A question like this, sometimes they ask you explain or describe yourself in 5 words. So here the 5 words have to be 5 adjectives that you have to use. For example, you say that one of the words that explains about me is being adaptable, right? So adaptability is your quality, and how can you say that? You should always have a reason to authenticate that, right? So your 5 qualities you should always be thorough about, right? Okay, these are the 5 qualities that I have to speak when somebody asks me to. Also, there can be questions like talk about yourself, something that you have not mentioned in your resume. So you have mentioned your technical skills in the resume, you have mentioned your hobbies, your interests, your projects, your family details and everything in the resume. Then what else is remaining? Your qualities maybe. So at that time also this answer can be helpful to you. Fine. There you have to present yourself as a stable candidate or a responsible candidate. So choose your words very analytically, right? Analyze whatever you're saying, whatever you have to speak there, just be formal about it. Okay, the words like stuff, the words like sometimes people answer I like, all that stuff and everything. So the words like stuff, and basically with the words which are slangs basically. So we avoid slangs in the interview because it's a formal interview, so we have to avoid slangs. Also, one more thing that I see when I take interviews is when I ask people question and they answer me. If I ask them, what do you think that being hardworking is a good quality? They say yes, you should be hardworking because you can succeed in life if you are hardworking. So guys, I am not saying that it is basically hard and fast rule that you cannot use you in the interview. But when we are sitting in front of the interviewer and I am directly pointing out at the interviewer and saying you should not be doing this, that means it can offend them sometimes. So to offend an interviewer is not a very good idea, I guess. So instead of saying you here, a person should be hardworking, an individual should be hardworking. So instead of using you can speak like that. Okay, they give you enough time to speak up, except for stress interviews, you know, where they are basically they want to confuse you. So otherwise they give you enough time to speak. Take time. There can be questions related to guesstimates these days, right? So guesstimates we've already done in class, but see, if you face problem and then sometimes they give you half a minute, and if you feel that half a minute is not enough time, you can always ask for more time. Rather than answering something wrong or not be able to explain why you came at a particular conclusion, it is always better to ask for more time, right? Because it's completely fine. Okay, sometimes, you know, they ask you a question and not able to understand it, but still you do not clarify it. What you do is you start answering the question straight away. So that is also not to be done. Always, you know, be always try to answer your questions in you know, just be calm, just think about it and answer the question. You do not be in haste to answer anything, right? Because haste creates waste otherwise, right? So these are some of the things that you need to, you know, take care of. So basically guys, interviews are a great tool that can help both the company and the candidates to make the right selection for the jobs. Interview not only helps the establishment to prosper and grow by selecting the right candidates, but it also provides a way for the employee to grow both professionally and personally. So do not take interviews as a burden. Take interviews as an opportunity, you know, to be able to grow professionally and personally, and to be able to seek your particular job. Be prepared for the interview and always put your best foot forward. All the best. And as I said in the video earlier, always be confident whenever you go for the interview. That is the best thing you have. Be yourself, be confident, and all the best.